Good morning and welcome to another edition of 15 Minutes of Flame. I'm Robert Phoenix and I will be dancing between two screens today as I try to give people in the visual world something to look at and the audio world something to listen to. Yes, I'm capturing today's broadcast via video and I'm going to put that up on YouTube and see how that goes. Of course, it's always going to be a work in progress as I become very self-conscious of my visual perception. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to get into some of the Seth Rich stuff, and I hate to do this because the was that sort of glance between my microphone and my screen. I'm turning to George Costanza. So here we go. We're going to get into the Seth Rich stuff today. Just to give you kind of an update here in Austin and Texas in general. Wild, intense thunderstorms, sheet lightning, finger lightning, buckets of rain, and it is par for the course for this time of year, at least since I've been here. I don't know what it was like before I got here, but in the spring and summertime, it basically is subtropical. It is what it is. It could be worse, right? It could be drought. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about Seth Rich. Let's talk about some Trump today. Let's get into sort of what's happening in the world at large. Last night on the live stream, I did a 90-minute broadcast on a number of different charts, one of which was Ted Kaczynski's. And I'll talk about Ted Kaczynski today. It is his birthday, the Unabomber, and we'll look at his manifesto. Yes, that's right. We'll look at Ted Kaczynski's manifesto. There are points in the manifesto that will blow your mind. They are way ahead of the curve in terms of what was going on at that time in the mid-90s between the ears of Ted Kaczynski and what's followed as a result. So we're going to get into some of that. But first, let's go to the Seth Rich piece because I want to, I don't want to beat this thing into the ground. And I'm not doing this for the sake of the Trump administration and Donald Trump and to prove that Donald Trump is not guilty of any links to Russia. And I don't believe he is. I think if it was there, it would have come out by now, and it would have come out long before now. Remember, the NSA has just about everything they want on us because the NSA taps into everything. And that's the nature of the NSA. They grab all of our conversations. They grab all of our YouTube broadcasts, wherever it's happening. They're grabbing it, and they're grabbing the keywords, and they're putting together profiles based on the keywords. I think it's probably got more sophisticated than the keywords. The keywords are kind of a nice little story to tell us, and in reality, it's probably likely a lot more than the keywords. So if there was evidence, ample evidence that Trump was in collusion with the Russians, it would have come out, and it would have thrown a major wrench in the election process, and Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders, whomever, if Bernie had the balls to run as an independent or as a third party, then it would have been out there and Trump would not have been elected. So let's keep all of that in mind. And a lot of this is, of course, a major distraction and a way to completely mortar and pillar Trump and the American people and the people of the world, because the world is connected now. We're not just living in some kind of backwater third world country. Even backwater third world countries have the internet and they have cell phones, so they're much more informed, whether it's truthfully informed or whether it's informed by the overarching driving program of the Matrix. Nonetheless, they are informed as they've ever been on the planet, for better or worse, and maybe more informed than us here in the U.S. to some extent. So let's get into the details around the Seth Rich piece, what I've been able to kind of put together and what other people I think are coming to the conclusion with. If Seth Rich had a 2-hour void from his stop at Lou's Sports Bar and Grill to his place in what's called a Tony district of the District of Columbia. He might have had to have walked through maybe a couple blocks of sketch. George Webb he did a walk the other day, and it took him 9 minutes to get from Lou's to Seth Rich's place. It's not very long. Where was he for 2 hours? Now the theory here, this is what George Webb has thrown out there, and other people have thrown out there, is that Seth Rich was abducted for 2 hours and taken away, and he was interrogated and then drugged, perhaps, and then dropped off in front of his place, where magically somebody was waiting for him in a bush to fire 2 shots in his back and run away. There are problems with this story, if that is one of the scenarios. One problem with the story is if you had Seth Rich in custody, why would you turn him loose? I mean, Washington has a long time history of just snuffing people and not having people find them for a very long time. Vince Foster comes to mind. Vince Foster was essentially removed, suicided, and his name, well, he wasn't suicided, he was killed. His name has come up quite frequently with Seth Rich. There's another person who just disappeared out of the blue, and her name was Chandra Levy. And Chandra Levy was an intern with Gary Condit, who is a pretty vile human. And if you look at Condit, if you get into Condit's past, and you get into his profile, you can see all the eyes wide shut. You can see all the Washington sex stuff. It's all in there. And Chandra Levy disappeared. There are people who think that Chandra Levy might have been Mossad, like Monica Lewinsky, whose son just died recently. I didn't even know she had a son. Anyway, if they wanted to get rid of Seth Rich, it could have been done, and it could have been done much easier if they did indeed round him up. Why would they ever turn him loose again? Wouldn't they run the risk of something going wrong with their strange little assassination plot? So let's just, move that forward, and let's say that he wasn't picked up. Let's say that he just was off somewhere, maybe doing a couple of, hits off of a crack pipe or an ice pipe or a fentanyl pipe or something like that, right? Let's say that's what he was doing. And then he kind of wandered back into his life. Now, if somebody wanted to make a hit, why would they fire 2 bullets to the back? That makes no sense at all. I mean, really, because if indeed he lived, and there are reports that he lived and he talked to police officers and was conscious when he was taken to the hospital, why would you want to risk that? I mean, if you really wanted to take care of business, wouldn't you just put a gun to the back of somebody's head? And I'm going to be graphic here, but wouldn't you just splatter their brains all over the place? I mean, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't. This part of the story to me does not make sense. It does not add up. And then you factor in this story that he went to the hospital and was theoretically okay. We've got this report from this anonymous kind of, not really an intern, but he's somebody that's close to being a doctor, and he's there and he's looking. He was part of this. He saw it. He can't stand He can't stand mute. He can't stand as a mute witness, and he's got to put something out on Reddit to let people know what happened that night. And now we've got people chasing this guy's lead down. That it's not hard to find out who the physicians were on that night. Clearly there's two guys and their records. So if this guy really wanted to make a difference and also wanted to stay alive, wouldn't he have just come forward and had a press conference? Wouldn't he have just done a YouTube video? I mean, there are a lot of different things that he could have done. And he even says that they'll probably figure out who I am. And by being anonymous, you're minimizing your chances of actually staying alive. So that's kind of strange and unusual. But again, I'm not saying that it didn't happen. It's just that if you follow these things through to their conclusion, they don't make sense. So I went back and I watched that video with Seth Rich's parents. And there are two things that come up in that video. And maybe I'll even try to figure out how to edit this thing so I can place the video over here and do some editing stuff. But at one point, after Seth Rich's father, Joel Rich, goes on a completely dry, monotone, matter-of-fact, bullets and people don't mix soliloquy, the camera almost on cue, and you have to watch this video because the camera almost on cue pans to this woman Mary Rich, who I think is his wife. It just goes right over there. Like there's no her talking and then it goes over. It's almost like it's on cue. Like there's a director going like stage director going like this, and then you hear probably in the camera pan left. It's all very staged, and as this is the weird part, as the camera pans left, you can see Joel Rich mouth her lines. It's brief, but you have to watch for it. But he mouths her. He knows her lines. And their lines. It's scripted. It's totally scripted. And then at one point, she appears to go off script. And he subtly reaches over and touches her. Like, get back on script. And then she kind of winds her thing down. And then back to Joel. And then they're, out of there in about, 2 minutes and 42 seconds or something like that. Remember, this is 2 days after. 2 days after Seth Rich was theoretically killed. I have my doubts still. So here's where the Gordian knot is. Because if these people are quote-unquote reality actors, or if they're operatives, if they're connected to like the Mossad or whatever, then what was the purpose of leaking the emails, number one? Because, of course, we know that Seth Rich, it's been established, he loved Bernie Sanders. He loved pandas and he loved Sanders. Pandas for Sanders. So this was a big piece of the election. What was the purpose of all of this? Was it to defeat Hillary Clinton, get the word out so that Bernie Sanders could take advantage of it? Well, that never happened. And that says maybe more about Bernie Sanders than the actual dynamics of the event itself. Of course, we got Pizzagate out of it, didn't we? And what happened there? Well, Alex Jones got bitch slapped. They were able to expose pedophilia and then shut it down. right? They were able to bring it out into the open. They were able to participate in the revelation of the method, and then they were able to shut it down. Isn't that convenient? And as a result of that, they began to hammer on the alt-right and the truth, the truth people, the alternative researchers, the conspiracy theorists, whatever. It became now a major shot across the bow for that community. And this whole process of awakening, you see? Now, is there another element to this, which is what I've been talking about, with the actual tranche of the leaks themselves? Because, Wikipedia, I mean, look, they could shut down Wikipedia, or WikiLeaks, they could shut down WikiLeaks in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat, they could shut it down, right? They could. If they wanted to, they could hit Julian Assange with some sort of a pulsed weapon. That wouldn't be a problem at all. There's many different ways in which this whole thing could be brought down easily. So if that's truly the case, then why is it still around and allowed to exist? Is it, like, as some people have thought about and mentioned, a limited hang, and is Assange a cutout? Very well could be. I find it really interesting that Sean Hannity has now become a bit of a truther and has sort of, put on this Kevlar vest and gone after, or is going after some of these things. Well, where was Sean Hannity about 15 years ago when we really needed Sean Hannity? When we were sweating our balls out there in alternative research, many of us in obscurity, and trying to knock down the door, where was he? He was off supporting George Bush, hegemony. Better late than never, I suppose, Sean. And of course, your network mate, Bill O'Reilly, never came around. In fact, was unceremoniously drummed out of Fox. Speaking of Fox, somebody brought it to my attention that Chris Cornell performed at the same theater that Prince performed at just before Prince died, the Fox Theater. And the day that Chris Cornell died, Roger Ailes of Fox died. Strange, isn't it? And apparently Fox is 666 when you break down the numerology. I think it's right? A, B, C, D, E. F is 6. F is 6. O, which is, I think, the 15th letter is 6. And X, which is the 24th letter, is 6. F-O-X. So you have 6, and then 15. 1 plus 5 is 6, and then 2 plus 4 is 6. So you get 666 with Fox. Anyway, I just thought I'd bring that up. The Seth Rich piece, I think, is, I wouldn't say it's a red herring, but it feels like we're going in the wrong direction. That's what it feels like. We're going in the wrong direction with Seth Rich. Now, Kim.com, the larger-than-life personality who is hiding out in New Zealand, apparently is going to have a statement on Tuesday, which I believe is Wednesday here in the U.S., about his involvement with Seth Rich and WikiLeaks. And there are people who are thinking that this is going to blow the roof off of everything. We'll see. We'll see what comes out of it. And if it does indeed make a dent, and to what extent the dent it makes. Correct? All right. Well, let's round that off with Seth Rich for now. There's a lot of rich material out there that you can delve into. Donald Trump making his strange, bizarre Middle East. If you look at where he's going, he's hitting. Okay, there are 4 places Trump is going. 1, first stop, Riyadh. Partying with the Saudis, Toby Keith, Melania not wearing the burqa, not wearing hijab. I guess Lindsay Lohan probably feels good about that. It's a good day for Lindsay Lohan. Although wearing the burqa and hijab might be good for her because um, she wants to be able to. What was going on here? This is what I don't like about the video stuff because now I got to go back in here. Yeah, here we go. There we. Yeah, see, I have to deal with the Mac going to sleep at like a certain point. I'm multitasking. This is the brave new world. It'll be fine. Anyway, Lindsay Lohan got to feel good about Melania not wearing the hijab, the burqa. It's a real statement for women. Good for you, Melania. Anyway, Trump starts off in Riyadh, and there's this picture of Trump with the Saudi king and the president of Egypt, and they have their hands on this globe that is lit up. Now, I know that Trump went on some kind of a tour for religious tolerance, or I think maybe this was an exhibit inside of the tour. I don't know if that's the case, but the photo is making the rounds of the internet, and it's Trump, the Saudi king, and this guy from Egypt, and they all have their hands on this lighted globe. And the globe is cradled by what looks like, iron bars. Now, the bars don't imprison the globe, but they're kind of holding it up, right? And there they are. They've got their hands on, and Trump looks like he's in a trance. It's really bizarre. And the Saudi king looks freaked out. Like there's something going on. And then the Egyptian president, he's all cool. He's like, oh yeah, this is great, man. I'm loving this. I'm loving this Trump guy. This is fun. Blah, 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 blah. Whatever. It's a very bizarre image. And we've tried to kind of figure out what their hands are on, what continent. And it looks like it could be Antarctica. So see if you can find that picture and check it out. It's really very, very strange. Extremely strange. So he starts off in Riyadh. So we have Islam, right? Jared Kushner makes a big deal. The United States makes a bunch of money. And now Trump is basically aligning himself with the quote-unquote NATO of the Middle East. This is a really interesting kind of development, right? I mean, this is kind of like Antichrist stuff in some ways. And I'm not saying that this is exactly what's going on, but it kind of feels, like it's very kind of biblical. He's arming the Saudis to the teeth. He's spearheading this Arabian, this Middle Eastern NATO, which includes the United Arab Emirates and Jordan and the Saudis. Of course, there's no Iran. There's none of the other countries. It's very select. So he's basically arming the Saudis, and they're going to be his bulldog in the Middle East. So he's connecting in with Islam, of course, with the trip to Riyadh. Then he's going to, in fact, he's there today. I think there are photos of him at the Wailing Wall where he's got his yarmulke on. Get the yarmulke on. Get the yarmulke on. Let's get our yarmulke on. Yeah. So he's got the yarmulke on, and he's at the Wailing Wall doing that thing. So he's there, and who knows what's going to go down there. It'll be very interesting theater. There's always something to tune on to channel. It's like, and Trump is, coming up on his birthday here pretty soon. We're in the realm of Gemini. The height of his powers are peaking in the solar return. And clearly Mars is making its presence known. I think Mars is at 20 degrees now? Gemini, so it'll be on his sun. Let's see, let me get into the astrology part of it here. I think it's on his sun now. Anyway, so it's the Abrahamic religion tour because after he spends time in Israel and tells people in Israel how great they are and what great ally and close friends and we could write that speech. I could write that speech. And who knows what will happen behind closed doors, but then they'll take off and then they'll head to the Vatican. So he's doing this religious tour. It's the Abrahamic faith tour. And he'll have the photo ops with the Pope and who knows what he'll say with the Pope, and he'll do the Vatican thing. He's proving himself to be a syncretist, right? And then he goes to Belgium. So he tops everything off in Belgium. And Belgium is, of course, the home of the European Union. So I decided to get on video, and my cat decides that he's going to kind of get on the act today. When it's radio, you'll hear the meow every now and then, but today he's decided to insert himself. So he's going to Belgium, which is the home of the EU, and that would be, in some ways, the fourth estate. If you look at the four religions, you have Islam, Judaism, Christianity/Catholicism, all of which have Freemasonry just shooting through their veins. And then you have Belgium, which is the home of the EU, and one could make a case that it is the capital, since it is the nominative sort of head or capital for the EU, that it would also be the capital for humanism. Because what we've seen with the EU is kind of the sort of the mock-up of the New World Order, and how we have the secular, humanistic / quasi-leftist energy of the social Marxist, which comprises the spiritual and philosophical backbone of the European Union. So now he's stopped at the fourth estate, and so in essence he's gotten the four major religions of the world. He's left out Buddhism. I don't think Trump's got a lot of interest in Buddhism, but hey, I wouldn't be surprised if he somehow takes an unexpected trip to northern India and hangs out in Nepal, or maybe he winds up going to India itself and spends some time at the Taj. I mean, this could be the Trump New World Religion Tour. Meanwhile, Reince Priebus flies back to the United States. Apparently, there is word that Reince Priebus is going to be shit-canned, just like James Comey was. So keep your eye on that. Very interesting times we're living in, and they are eclectic, to say the least. I wanted to talk about the Unabomber for a little bit. Today is Teddy Kaczynski's birthday. He's in a Supermax prison, and he is in the same prison with Manuel Noriega, and he was in the same prison with Charles Harrelson, who's Woody Harrelson's father. So who else is in there? I think it's Terry Nichols. Tim McVeigh was in there, but Tim McVeigh's dead, right? It was Terry Nichols, or we think he's dead. Who knows? With the doubles, clones, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to bring up Ted Kaczynski's manifesto, which is essential reading, Industrial Society and Its Future, by Theodore Kaczynski, and it was written in 1995. So the internet was just starting to take off in 1995. Just starting to take off. Mozilla had created the web browser and made surfing the internet more a lot easier. URLs were, the whole idea of a URL was kind of if you said URL to somebody back in 1995, they'd look at you cross-eyed. But now you say URL, of course, a 7-year-old knows what a URL is. So he wrote this just before they opened the door in a big way to the internet. And I highly recommend reading this because it is pretty amazing. And one of the things that you would not expect from this manifesto is Ted Kaczynski's take on the left. He's got a header here, the psychology of modern leftism. It's really kind of brilliant. He talks at great length about the psychology of modern leftism. Let me just read you a bit here so you can understand the prescient nature of what Kaczynski was tapping into. This is what he says. Almost everyone will agree that we live in a deeply troubled society, one that one of the most widespread manifestations of the craziness of our world is leftism. So a discussion of the psychology of leftism can serve as an introduction to the discussion of the problems of modern society in general. But what is leftism? During the first half of the 20th century, leftism could have been practically identified with socialism. Today, the movement is fragmented, and it is not clear who can properly be called a leftist. When we speak of leftists in this article, we have in mind mainly socialists, collectivists, politically correct types, feminists, gay and disability activists, animal rights activists, and the like. But not everyone who is associated with one of these movements is a leftist. What we are trying to get at in discussing leftism is not so much movement or an ideology as a psychological type, or rather a collection of related types. Thus, what we mean by leftism will emerge more clearly in the course of our discussion of leftist psychology. Also see paragraphs 227 through 230. Even so, this is point 8, even so, our conception of leftism will remain a good deal less clear than we would wish, but there doesn't seem to be any remedy for this. All we are trying to do here is indicate in a rough and approximate way the two psychological tendencies that we believe are the main driving force of modern leftism. We by no means claim to be telling the whole truth about leftist psychology. Also, our discussion is meant to apply to modern leftism only. We leave open the question of the extent to which our discussion could be applied to the leftists of the 19th and early 20th century. The two psychological tendencies that underlie modern leftism we call feelings of inferiority and over-socialization. Feelings of inferiority are characteristic of modern leftism as a whole, while over-socialization is characteristic only of a certain segment of modern leftism, but this segment is highly influential. I'm going to read one more paragraph here. By feelings of inferiority, we mean not only inferiority feelings in the strict sense, but a whole spectrum of related traits. Low self-esteem, feelings of powerlessness, depressive tendencies, defeatism, guilt, self-hatred, etc. We argue that modern leftists tend to have some such feelings, possibly more or less repressed, and that these feelings are decisive in determining the direction of modern leftism. One more. And he gets very frank here. A little salty. Get ready. When someone interprets as derogatory almost anything that is said about him or about groups with whom he identifies, we conclude that he has inferiority feelings or low self-esteem. Basically, if somebody has, according to Kaczynski, good self-esteem, it's like water off a duck's back. It doesn't really faze you, right? Which makes some sense. This tendency is pronounced among minority rights activists, whether or not they belong to the minority groups whose rights they defend, which is an interesting point. They are hypersensitive about the words used to designate minorities and about anything that is said concerning minorities. The terms Negro, Oriental, handicapped, or chick for an African, an Asian, a disabled person, or a woman originally had no derogatory connotations. Broad and chick were merely the feminine equivalents of guy, dude, or fellow. The negative connotations have been attached to these terms by activists themselves. Some animal rights activists have gone so far as to reject the word pet and insist on its replacement by animal companion. Leftish anthropologists go to great lengths to avoid saying anything about primitive peoples that could be conceivably interpreted as negative. They want to replace the word primitive by non-literate. They seem almost paranoid about anything that might suggest that any primitive culture is inferior to our own. We do not mean to imply that primitive cultures are inferior to ours. We're merely pointing out the hypersensitivity of leftish anthropologists. So you can get a sense here as to what Kaczynski was getting into. He was breaking down essentially what is an assimilative process of the Borg mind. And he gets into over-socialization. But what he really delves into here are the sources of social problems and the rapid rise of technology. This is a big part of the Kaczynski manifesto. It's worth checking out. It's worth finding. It's worth looking at it from a time capsule perspective and seeing where we are today. I am not, obviously, condoning the radical efforts or methods of Ted Kaczynski to wake people up, if indeed he was even engaged in those efforts themselves. This was 1995. This was all pre-internet. What would happen if there was a Reddit or a vote around at that time? Maybe we could determine that Ted Kaczynski might not have had anything to do at all with those bombings, in which case we might be having a very different discussion about not only Ted Kaczynski, but the material that he was launching into our consciousness. Well, I think that just about does it for today in this new format where I'm recording video and kind of looking at myself every now and then as I move from my head to my microphone to the other screen. You know, I always really appreciate the dialogue that I get from people. Last night I was in a bit of a funky space, and I looked at the YouTube numbers, and they're just pedestrian, to be honest with you. And I put something up on Facebook, and I said, well, I'm kind of dumbfounded by the numbers. And it wasn't like I thought, oh, well, gee, I've got to have bigger numbers than this. I was even just kind of openly speculated that maybe the numbers themselves are being throttled, because it seemed to me that if you go on, I'm sorry, I'm just going on a rant here a little bit. If you go on a YouTube video that has like 200 views, how many comments do you think that YouTube video has? I guarantee you none. I'll get 10 comments on a video that's got 200 views. And so to me, the math doesn't add up. And the dumbfounded part wasn't that, I should be more of a success, or, it should be whatever. I've dealt with that for the past 10 years, and it is what it is, and I just do what I do, and that's fine. It was just more from perhaps the algorithmic perspective. So some people were saying, well, you've got to have a vision, you've got to have visuals. People like to look at somebody, right? So here I am. Let's see where it goes. We're going to run this for the next week. As soon as I'm done recording today, I'm going to turn this around and try to do some editing, or I'll just convert it and stick it right up there on YouTube. And we'll see how it goes. In the meantime, the other thing that was coming through loud and clear from people, and I want to echo their sentiment here, is that what people really need is spiritual juice right now. And I cannot agree more. I can't agree more, because the social fabric is tearing like it's a cheap shirt from Taiwan or something, wherever they're making cheap shirts. They could be making cheap shirts here. Oh, here we go now. I've had to do this again. Okay, we're back. 20 minutes. Anyway, we got to feed ourselves spiritually. And part of my job for you is to give you things that are spiritually nourishing. This is what I'm here to do. Mars and Cancer, I'm here to do it. So at the end of every episode, at the end of every 15 minutes of flame, now 40 minutes of flame, I am tasked with rounding this off so that all of us, not just you, but me as well, have a sense of empowerment during a time where it feels as though we are powerless. And I see what's happening in the Reddit world. I see what's happening in the vote world. I see where people are doing their best to reclaim some power over the media, over a justice system that has become unjust. And I champion these efforts. I laud them. I applaud them. And we may run down the wrong path sometimes. We may wind up being taken into a cul-de-sac, but over time, we will evolve and we will learn. We are part of a macro field of consciousness that is getting wiser, that is getting more switched on with each and every day. And don't you ever forget that, even in your most isolated moments in time. Because even in those moments, there is a spark of consciousness, the still small voice that wishes to speak to you directly. And when we all get switched on with that, look out. All right, that's your 15 minutes of flame. I'm Robert Phoenix. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to what's possible. Tomorrow we get this down to 30 minutes as I nail down the video portion of this. We'll see you 24 hours from now.